Hey everyone, welcome to the weirdest news in history with me, your host, Ben Chasteen. And tonight I'll be talking about number five. A woman shared her terrifying experience of close encounters of the too close for comfort kind. For the first time, she shares in detail her alien abduction experience. And number four, a boy, almost every boy dreams of becoming Spider Man one day. But these three boys took this dream to a whole new level when they tried something drastic to turn them into the web slinger. And number three, some people have said that their Alexa spontaneously laughs, which Amazon dubbed a simple malfunction, albeit a creepy one. However, one user had a paranormal experience after her grandmother passed away. Could spirits beyond converse with us through Alexas? Through our Alexas? And there's more stories with that one too. And number two, they didn't call it the Wild West for just any old reason. Hear about the most infamous gunfight at the OK Corral, where the legendary Wyatt Earp and his friend Doc Holliday took on a group of lawless cowboys who ran amok through the frontier town of Tombstone, Arizona. And number one, venturing into the heart of Europe's forested hinterlands, we'll uncover the wild men of Central Europe. These beings are part folklore, part historical enigma, and are said to roam the wilderness. Did these people encounter a race of Bigfoot? And if that's weird enough for you, stay tuned to hear the rest of the weirdest news in history with me, your host, Ben Chasteen. Hey everyone, hope you're doing well on this weirder news Wednesday. Yeah, we'll kind of like just jump right into this because we have quite a some of these are kind of longer and some of them are a little shorter. So, starting off number five here, sharing my alien abduction experiences for the first time. This was actually just posted on Reddit just like a couple of days ago from someone named Lavender Sky. She gave her abduction experience, which she believed to be an abduction experience. She said, "I've never told anyone most of what I'm about to share. As a child, I often felt like someone or something was in my room at night. I'd hide under my blanket, terrified, until it went away or I fell asleep. My mom mentioned seeing shadows walking down the hallway into my room at night. Also, but if she get up and turn on a light, nothing was there." So that's kind of creepy, right? And I've actually seen some of that stuff myself, those like shadow being things. It's very freaky. She goes on to say, "I remember seeing a short, almost childlike figure with a large head walking down the hall on one occasion. My mother was convinced our house was haunted, but perhaps it was something else. Fast forward to my adult years, I constantly have night terrors and wake up screaming because I felt something grab my foot or arm." So I'm kind of thinking most likely she's seeing the grays. That's kind of my thought about this whole thing. She goes on to say, "I often dream of something trying to kill me, and in the dream, I'm trying to run and hide. Sometimes I'm unable to move or see, but I can always hear. More recently, I had a dream where I was on a spacecraft, and apparently I had woken up from my earthly consciousness. There were many large lit up screens, almost like televisions, lined up in front of me. The other beings, who looked human, were happy to see me, but basically said I was too early and it wasn't my time to be there, so I have to go back. Next thing I know, I'm back in my body on Earth in my bed." That's all she wrote. I mean, she responds to some of the comments, because other people are mentioning in the comments like, "Wow, this sounds like something I experienced," or, you know, kind of referencing the Grays here as well, and she kind of agrees with them in this aspect. So, very weird, and it does match some similar stories from what I heard, especially the television screens. I've actually heard that before, and so, yeah, and then these like shadow things, it could be a combination of a couple different things. It could be a combination of like ghosts. It could also be like, after a while, I started thinking like, I wonder if these are beings in other dimensions that are kind of like phased in. So it's like they're half in our dimension and half in their dimension. And so we're kind of seeing as the shadow things because they're not fully in our dimension. So that's one way I started thinking about that too. So either way, not a fun experience, but and I mean like some of my friends who feel like they've been abducted, like I said, very, very, very similar stuff. Um, Especially with the night terrors and everything else. Yeah, unfortunately, that does kind of go along with that. But as kind of freaky as it is, it's like good that people are coming out and talking about these things because there's so many people, and I know so many of you watching have had these experiences, which is why you're probably watching us to begin with. Kind of like I don't want to feel alone anymore, and so I think a lot of people do feel that way. So it's nice to have a place where you can talk about these things without being, you know, feeling like you're weird. But this next one though is a little bit more on the funnier aspect. So yeah, the saying number 4 here. So with great power comes great responsibility, and with great imagination sometimes great pain. So probably every young boy out there, and maybe some adults as well, would love to be Spider-Man. Um, I'm not gonna lie, maybe I've thought about that too here and there. I mean, he is one of the most popular comic book characters of all time. So, 3 brothers in Bolivia, ages 8, 10, and 12, took this to a whole new level when they found a venomous black widow spider and decided to poke it with a stick to agitate it a little bit. So, therefore, it could bite them so they could turn into Superman or Spider-Man and have Spider-Man superpowers. So, that's what they did. Instead of climbing up walls, they were probably climbing up walls in pain at that point. And instead of having super strength, their mother returned to see them crying. She rushed them to the hospital, like in a small town in Bolivia here, where their symptoms worsened to include muscle aches, sweating, fever, and shaking. I mean, it's like a black widow spider. You're not going to necessarily die, but yeah, if it's untreated, you definitely are not going to, be well for a while. Um, it's kind of common in the United States, black widow spiders. My brother got bit by one actually. So anyway, after they were treated, they were then discharged. Everything was going fine. But the story gets even weirder. If you'll never believe this. So that story happened in 2020. Then in 2023, the same thing happened to another kid in Bolivia. Like, what is this with Bolivia and people like me, Spider-Man, and letting themselves be bitten? Like, this is so weird. Is the media telling kids this is a good thing or something? I have no idea. So this other young boy found another black widow spider under a rock and placed it on his hand so it could bite him in hopes that he would also turn into Spider-Man. After being bitten by the spider, the boy captured it in a glass jar and then went home. And after a few hours, he was feeling really bad and his body started aching and everything else. Finally, he confessed to his mother that he got bitten by a colorful spider because he wanted to be Spider-Man. So, so she rushed him to the hospital and they treated him too. So, I was like, okay, is it just the fact that we don't really hear about it much? Maybe we didn't have the internet, prior to like 2000. So I was like, maybe stories just kind of got lost, but I couldn't really find another story of kids specifically trying to have spiders biting them to become Spider-Man. So I don't know what it is about Bolivia. It's so weird. But I mean, I remember thinking about this as a kid as well, and I was like, well, you kind of need the radioactive part, right? Without the radioactive part, it's just a spider that's going to bite you. So you're not so, anyway, and probably if you got, I mean, I can't even imagine a spider would, if it was really radioactive, it probably wouldn't live very long. So Anyway, it's funny. I'm just glad they're okay. That's all I can say. So, but probably not the best thing in the world, especially if you're in Australia. I mean, you have one of those poisonous spiders bite you in Australia, then that's it. Like those little white ones. I forget what they're called. It's freaky. I still can't get over people just like live in Australia with all these poisonous stuff. So weird. And why in Australia out of all places? Strange. I don't know. All right, let's move on to number 3. Can ghosts speak to Alexa? So this is kind of interesting because there was like some interesting Reddit forums with people writing their stories about what happened with Alexa, and I also found this article. So first, I want to talk about this really interesting story that I found on Reddit. This is written by Panchan2. I'm not sure. I'm assuming it's a woman. So I don't know for sure, but I'll just say a woman. So she said, I'm pretty close to straight up moving out of my house. Anyone have any ideas on what could be causing this? So last night, I'm sitting on my couch, home alone, surfing on my phone, not doing anything out of the ordinary, and my Alexa starts to blast the Scooby-Doo theme song. This absolutely freaks me out. One, because it's a loud noise out of nowhere. That would freak me out too. And number 2, because I didn't tell her to do that. Whatever, my brain doesn't want to process it, writes it off as maybe a glitch, so I go take a shower to calm down before bed. As I'm getting out of the shower, it happens again. Only this time, it's an a cappella version of the Scooby-Doo theme song. So at this point, I pull up the Alexa app to see what's going on in there. I found out that not only has it been hearing me tell it to play these songs, by the way, which she didn't even say out loud, but it has been hearing me ask it to search the phrases death, why death, what is death, and what dead. Like, she was seeing these on her search in the app, and she definitely didn't search for these. Already ruled out another person in my house, my husband playing a cruel prank. So she's like, oh yeah, so it is definitely a woman. So she's like, I ruled out, any other person in the house. It's not my husband playing some kind of cruel prank. So either Alexa is haunted or this is some kind of Halloween prank by Amazon. And I don't think that is. So I mean, it's definitely not from Amazon, so I would say that's kind of freaky.
I could be somebody who hacked it too.
Yes, actually, that's probably not that could be. That really could be. I don't know how rare that would be, but you're right. I mean, that's definitely has happened before, so um depending on how and what's connected to. So yeah, it could be, but there's more stories. There's definitely more of these. So in 2018, there were several reports of Alexa spontaneously laughing, and you can find some of those on YouTube, some of these videos and everything. And there's like, that's when Amazon was like, oh, this is just a malfunction. Um, so, one Echo user explained a number of odd activities surrounding their device. On one particular day after the passing of their grandmother, they truly began to wonder if spirits beyond were conversing with Alexa. So, this is what she wrote. She said, my grandmother passed away around that time. A couple of days after her passing, the Echo turned on when I was alone and started playing Mandy by Boston. I had never heard that song before and had never played it on my Echo. My grandmother was the only one who called me Mandy. Now, just to note, I'm wondering if she's getting some songs confused because there is the song Mandy by Barry Manilow, but Boston's song is Amanda, and they don't say Mandy in the song. So I'm just, I don't know if she got that confused or if if she was talking about the song Amanda. But either way, it's very strange. Another case, this is what the person wrote. She said, quote, my grandpa passed away a few months back, leaving my grandma to live by herself. She has an Amazon Echo. One night, she was alone getting ready for bed. She heard a song start playing in the living room in a house that was completely silent. Alexa was playing the song Lucille by Kenny Rogers, a song shares a song she shares a name with. That's her grandmother's name. The song was my grandparents' favorite song to dance to while they were together. So it really does seem like that. I mean, okay, so that could be like, oh, maybe she listens to it, but it's like, why would it just randomly play that song? It's kind of interesting, So I'm kind of more inclined to think that's probably her grandfather doing that one. And let's see, I think I have one final example here. She said, this person wrote, today my mom was on her house phone with my grandmother. My mom left her cell phone at work an hour away. While she was talking, her Alexa came on, lit up green, and said, quote, Dad wants to talk. Dad wants to talk. And she repeated again 2 more times. My grandfather's father passed away last Christmas. It's crazy. I mean, I if you kind of think about it, all these devices and things, they're all just like electricity, energy, and whatnot that could probably, and I think these things can easily be way more manipulated, especially like radios and things like that. So to me, it's like, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that they can manipulate these things in this way. So any kind of like electronic device. I mean, there's all kinds of weird things with the iPhone too, even like someone will pass away and get a text message randomly, or something like that happens. So it's very, very weird. I've definitely had some weird things happen with text messages in that regard too. So very strange. But I think those are cool things. There's like the scary ghost stuff, and then there's also like the cool stuff like this that, after a family member passes away, you get like interesting things like this. So I think it's kind of cool. I wouldn't be probably as freaked out over something like that. But all right, let's move on to our number 2 story. Now, I mean, you might be kind of wondering like why I kind of included this in the weird news, but I think it's just such a fascinating story, and I didn't even know the whole thing. Like you've seen the movie Tombstone. That's Hollywood. They're always like glamorizing certain aspects, or you know, changing certain things within the narrative. So thought it'd be kind of cool to go through and what really did happen at the most famous gunfight, really one of the most famous ones in history, or at least in the Wild Wild West, with the OK Corral, Tombstone with Wyatt Earp, and Doc Holliday and all of that. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to dive into this a little bit to show you guys, like I know probably you've heard about it, but you probably don't know all the details. So the Cochise County Cowboys surrendered before the gunfight began, in which some say Wyatt Earp and his brothers had it out for the Cowboys. The Cowboys is what they called like bandits back then. I didn't even really know that. I forgot that, like now we think of cowboys as like cowboys, but it's like back then that was like, the bad guys. It's kind of weird. Anyway, so this Cochise went from being a nuisance because like at the time they were all like, Wyatt Earp and all of them, they were just like, okay, whatever, and then all of a sudden, I mean, because they were just kind of like doing their own thing in some aspects. I don't even know how much crime was really part of this Cochise County Cowboys, but there was a massive change. They went from just kind of being there as a nuisance to become like the mortal enemies of Earp and his brothers. So or the Earp brothers, I'm sorry. It all started when one of the members, Curly Bill Brocius, that's Wyatt Earp right there. Yeah. 21. Man, it's weird. It looks like it's like taken now and then like went through a process to make it look old. That's like,
Yeah, it does.
when I first saw the photo, I was like, no, that can't be him. That dude looks like he's just like just walking down the street. Literally. It's so interesting. It kind of looks familiar, but I couldn't really figure out who. But anyway, okay, so this guy, one of the cowboy members, this Curly Bill Brocious' gun went off. So Wyatt Earp and his friend, who was known as Fred White, who was the marshal at the time, they approached them. They're like, hey, we need your guns. This Curly guy went to go give him his gun, and when he did, his gun ended up going off, and it was completely an accident, and it shot Fred White, the current marshal, and he died soon after that. And Curly was like really apologetic, and even while Fred was dying, he told Wyatt that he knew it was an accident, and Wyatt ended up defending Curly in court while he was on trial for his death, like to confirm, like, hey, this guy actually didn't kill him on purpose. It's okay, I was there, kind of thing. So Virgil Earp, Wyatt Earp's brother, was then made Marshal of Tombstone. And this is kind of when Tombstone was like, I had no idea how popular Tombstone was back during this time. It was like, I think it was like 7,000 people living in the area or something like that. It was a lot of people anyway. And like, there were some really old newspaper clippings. Yeah. And so they were like, because after what happened with Fred, there was a zero tolerance of guns or any kind of suspicious activity. Some historians think that the Earps were a little bit too, like, putting the hammer way too down and abused their power. So this is where some of the controversy comes in, because of course that wasn't really displayed in any of the movies, but historically there's been some question about that. So Virgil made an order that any man found with a gun was to be arrested on the spot. So this is Virgil Earp that said this without question. Like, you have a gun, you're in jail, no questions asked, or you can't, nothing about it. You have to either turn in your gun or you get arrested. So this upset many of the cowboys, along with the sheriff at the time, who thought it was a little bit too overbearing. He decided not to carry out these arrests, which angered the Earp brothers even more so. So Wyatt secretly sought out to become the new sheriff, because he's like, okay, this guy's not doing what he said he's doing. I'll become the new sheriff. So he promised a local rancher named Ike Clanton, $6,000, which is a whole lot of money back then, if he would help bring the cowboys to justice. Now, this guy, Ike Clanton, kind of had an in with the Cowboys. He knew them and everything else. So no one really knows what happened. They don't know if Clanton just had a change of heart, or maybe the Cowboys paid him off, or whatever reason. He decided very soon he wasn't going to follow through with this and not accept the money. So the day before the shootout occurred, which I think was October 26, 1881. I forgot to put the date in here, but I think it was that date. So right before the day before the shootout, entered Doc Holliday. And Doc Holliday got into a major confrontation with Clanton, and Clanton began to make threats against the Wyatt brothers, or the Earp brothers. So, this set Clanton over the edge. And later on, I think it was that evening, Clanton was really drunk and was shooting his gun, and there's no gun policy, right? So Wyatt Earp went over to him and just like pistol whipped him on the back of his head for being drunk and shooting his gun in the air. Then Wyatt saw another cowboy member. His name is Tom McLaury, having a gun as well. So Wyatt also pistol whipped him like twice over the head and left him pretty much as a bloody mess on the ground. He just left him there. So this really started to anger the Cowboys. This is when they were starting to plot against the Earp brothers and everything else. So again, this is like all happening the night before the shootout, the eve before the shootout was happening. So there are some instances where it's suggested that the Earps were kind of their own gang in their own way, kind of seeking control over Tombstone. The film's kind of, obviously the film glorifies them in a very like, hero kind of way. So it's and like according to historical accounts, I mean, people are saying different things. So even I was having a hard time checking to see which one is true. I think whatever you say, and some people say that the Earps were like gang members themselves doing things on the side that were kind of illegal. I couldn't really find any truth to that. I think more so that they were probably just like pushed over the top and just trying to, you know, end this by any means possible, even if it meant like kind of going above the law in this case. So on the day of the shootout, Clanton, McLaury, they're both of their brothers. This guy named Billy Claiborne. So there was like what, five or so of them, all started to approach Tombstone then with their guns out. They were like, okay, we're going to go after the Earp brothers at this point. So, and then there was this 19-year-old Billy guy too. So maybe there was like five or six of them, I guess. Anyway, so they went to OK Corral to get their revenge. They did intend to kill the Earps. I mean, they were going to. This is why this is kind of so interesting, because based on what you read, the accounts are like what happened next is kind of different. And so I looked up the official report from like Tombstone or whatever it is, and I'm going to kind of read what it says, or how it portrays the fight and everything else. So as they were walking in Tombstone, the Earps and Holliday approached them first, which basically makes me realize they probably either one had some kind of knowledge of them already coming in, or somebody saw them and alerted them. Anyway, they confronted them first. One of them, I might have been Holliday, says, "Throw up your hands. I come to disarm you." The next part is very questionable what transpired. According to old newspapers, it just reported that at that moment a gunfight broke out. There are some accounts where they were actually going to surrender their guns, and then Wyatt Earp fired first. It was like they pulled out their gun to like surrender it, and then Wyatt fired on them. It's hard to say at this point, and I don't think anyone is ever going to really find the answer to that. And at this point, Frank drew his pistol, and some say he was giving it up. Like I said, either way, whatever transpired at that moment, the biggest gun battle outside of war during this time took place with 30 bullets fired in 30 seconds. Now, in the movie, it was a little bit more drawn out, like 60 seconds, and it was a more of an open area, and they were fighting in different places and things like that. This was all kind of like just right there. Wyatt shot first. He shot Frank in the abdomen, while simultaneously Doc Holliday shot Frank's brother in the chest, pretty much killing him instantly. I mean, it like kind of blew a hole in his chest at that point. So, which kind of makes me think that they were already like planning on killing these guys. So the young kid, Billy, he took off, and then he started shooting them from behind as he was like running. And after it was all said and done, pretty much all of them, all the guys, all the cowboy guys were found dead, except for the Clanton guy, the Ike Clanton. He was the only one that lived. Virgil Earp, his leg was hit, but Doc Holliday and Wyatt were uninjured. And in the aftermath, everyone in the town ran into the streets. So as soon as it was over, it was like everyone was running to the streets to see what happened. Well, who's alive, who's dead, what's going on. Ike Clanton ran into the Kellogg Saloon. I found this so fascinating. I'm like, is this like Kellogg? I mean, it's spelled exactly the same. So, I mean, it could make sense that that's one of the Kellogg brothers or a precursor to that. Anyway, he was arrested and then put in jail like immediately. I don't know exactly what happened, if he was, I don't think he was executed, but that's kind of what happens. So in the aftermath of all this, I think like then the movie kind of glorifies all this and how great they were and everything else. And they really might have been. It's just really hard to say, but I think this is, I don't know. It's like thinking about this from the perspective of like 30 seconds, like this massive battle took out in 30 seconds. And it was like, a bullet fired every second for 30 seconds. It must have been like I get this question a lot, like, hey, if you could go back in time and like see something, or, what would you want to go back in time and see? And like something like this would be so, I mean, granted, like people are dying, but this is such a historic moment in history, just to just kind of be like this witness to really see how everything transpired, like leading to this, and see Wyatt Earp and everything. I mean, it's like, kind of like, I mean, that's why the movie Tombstone was so popular, right? Because it's like people are really into this stuff. So anyway, it's kind of cool stuff. My cat is going crazy. Sorry, guys. He wanted to go outside. So all right. Anyway. All right. But yeah, pretty cool stuff here. So all right, let's move on to our last one here, where we got the Wild Man of Central Europe. Here we go. My mouse is stuck. Okay, here we go. So this is a crazy story, and I didn't realize how in depth this really was until I started to do this. So this is located between the founding countries of Europe to the west, Russia, and to the Russia. There are a wide range of countries that have in common rich history and culture. In this central and eastern part of Europe, this is where this like fantastic folklore occupies this whole area. The savage man, they call it. And I didn't even know much about this. This is what's so fascinating. And the savage man has been in all different kinds of cultures and part of their art and folklore and everything else. So this goes back to this article starts out in 1661 when a Polish author wrote about several bears that were being hunted in the Lithuanian forest of, I think this is pronounced Gordno, which is now basically in Belarus anyway. So that was like a popular forest, I guess, like a big forest at the time. So again, this is in the 1600s. And while these men were hunting, they saw a savage boy among the bears who then they captured and brought to King Jan Casimir II, I think that's his name, of Poland. So they said the boy, well, it is written that the boy was covered in dense fur and could not speak. The Queen of Poland tried to humanize the boy and sent him to work in the kitchen. He was then presented to the vice chancellor, after which there was no record of what happened after that. It's like they sent him to the vice chancellor, and then what? What did the guy do? Don't know what happened after that. But anyway, they gave him the name, which means in English, young bear from Lithuania. Well, the story continues on. So that was in 1660. In 1694, a second wild boy was also caught in the same forest. He was brought to the current king, and this time he was examined by the personal physician of King Bernard Connor, who the physician became a member of the Royal College of Medicine and the Royal Society of Great Britain. If you guys, we've dived in very deep with the Royal Society, so I'm kind of like, okay, this is, all these secret societies, they have to know all these things, and I think that's why there's this massive cover up, because it's like, oh yes, there are these things that exist, but then it goes against everything that we're teaching in science that we want people to know about, so we can't possibly acknowledge this stuff. So anyway, additional reports from Western Europe aside from all that, there was also a Russian report about this boy in Poland saying that King Jan III found him among the bears and they caught him in the forest, but all he could do is roar. So there was an additional report at this time, um, that this another boy, or whatever you want to say, these like ape boys, hairy boys, were living in the forest with these bears. So there's a little bit more stories, but I want to fast forward a few hundred years later. In 1936, a group of foresters expecting one of the great forests near um, Latvia met an entity similar to a monkey man crouching at the foot of a tree who was female at this time. The forest is like near Riga, I think. I think that's how to pronounce it. Riga, Latvia, anyway, and wherever that is. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway,
The
when
country
she's
Latvia.
yeah, Latvia. Oh, I said Latvia. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, Latvia. Anyway, when she saw the men, she ran away quickly by swinging to a branch and climbing to the top of a tree with remarkable speed and agility. When one of the foresters shot at her, the entity uttered a piercing cry and fell to the ground, where she was then grabbed by the men, who discovered that she had no clothes on but was covered head to toe with hair. Now, this is in 1984 Belarus, when a world renowned Belarusian archaeologist conducted archaeological inspections along the banks of the West Vienna River in 1984. This is what she said. She said members of a local military detachment told her that they saw a 3-meter high woman walking on the edge of the forest carrying either a bag or maybe a bed, but was covered in hair. 3-meter high. That's like 15 feet. That's huge. That's crazy, right? Like roughly, maybe like 12, 13, 14, between 10 to 15 feet. I mean, that's massive no matter how you look at it. Also in the 80s were two more stories which caused a great deal of excitement in Belarus newspapers as well. One occurred in 1983. A student near a village in the Minsk region said he met a humanoid figure, also 3 to 4 meters high. Okay, I guess like that would have been like 5 meters would be like 15 feet, right? So at least like 8 to 10 feet anyway. But he said the being turned out to be covered with thick fur that had shades from dark brown to black on different parts of the body. It also had a huge hairy head, and the arms and legs were like extremely long, like longer than, abnormally long, which also goes into Bigfoot, that's like the same similar things to what we hear about Bigfoot. Then in 1984, there was a man named Vessel who met an unknown creature at 2 a.m. And he said that the sky was so bright, probably the moon was like a full moon or something, that he said it was almost as visible as daylight. And he said that as he approached the forest, he suddenly heard footsteps behind him. Eventually, the footsteps began to become noisier and closer, and he heard this like creature approach him. Vessel stated he started running and managed to get away from the creature, and then he hid behind trees. At this point, he didn't really see it, but he was like he could hear it, and it was just something big that was coming towards him. Later, he ended up seeing a creature much larger than a man, and he described it with a long neck and like a small head. So I don't know. This is a weird looking thing here. This is supposedly a real photo. Uh, Super weird. I don't know if this is what he saw or not, but it does look like this. And he said my hair was rising. I didn't know what to do. There was only one thought: to run away. So he ran to a local chapel, I'm sorry, and then fell to his knees and began to pray. He said he heard a great ruckus from like that was behind him, like while he was inside this church, and it seemed that stones were falling from the mountains into into the streams. And he said the monster didn't run after me. It probably had its own territory. So at that point, he said once he ran in the chapel, he felt like it kind of like went away. And also, I think he felt his prayers really helped on that. So there's even a more recent sighting in 2022. There were several sightings in this one region, also in that area, in Belarus. And the chief of police even wrote statements warning citizens of an unknown creature that could pose a potential threat to humans. So a 74-year-old resident in several other villages observed this large creature on two legs wandering around in a maize field, or like a cornfield or something like that, I guess. And it had long, thick black fur, and by the outer appearance, they said it looked like a monkey or some kind of gigantic, great monkey, but it was just moving on two legs, like upright walking, on two legs. So then a local fisherman also testified. This is also in during the same time period here, how a Yeti type of creature was swimming from one bank to the other and then headed towards like the center of the like the hamlet area. Local hunters were already quite prepared to catch or kill the monster, but they never found it and never reappeared after that. So like he saw it, he alerted everybody, everyone came running around trying to like capture the creature, and then it just disappeared. Any attempts at this point to capture the creature were not successful, and there was more reports that took place between 2014 and 2015, but these were the ones that were kind of like a little bit like, whoa, that's direct encounters, and people were seeing them. There were also stories, so like I was blown away. I mean, almost every country from Europe, Ukraine, Russia, Croatia, Hungary, I mean, all those countries have these detailed sightings that go back through history of these like Bigfoot, big feet. What is plural of Bigfoot? Is it just Bigfoot, like deer? The
I feel
Yetis,
like
the
that's up for debate.
Sasquatches. What'd you say, Lindsay?
I feel like that's up for debate.
Yeah, I know. It really is. But I think the most fascinating thing out of all of this is that every single country on the planet has some name for these like big feet or Bigfoot kind of creatures, the Yeti, whatever they are, in like it's so fascinating to see that all these countries, I mean, they have different names, or they call them like, the monkey men or the wild man or whatever. So it's just, to me, it shows that there's definitely things that exist in our world that we can't explain. And everyone's like, well, why don't we see them? But again, like we've only explored 5% of the Amazon and 5% of like, probably any forest that's out there. The only way that it's like officially gets explored is if they're doing some kind of like deforesting or building or something like that. That's the only way that government agencies will go in and like look at every aspect. That's probably why in national parks there's so many weird things that happen. One, they're gigantic, and two, they don't have the manpower to like comb through every single aspect of it. You have park rangers and stuff who have their own weird stories, by the way. You talk to a lot of park rangers, they know weird things take place. So not every single one of them, but a lot of them do, and a lot of them don't really want to talk publicly about it. So there's definitely strange things going on. And so anyway, I find this topic so fascinating, especially when you see that all these different accounts of Bigfoot all over the place. So there's so many to name that I couldn't even get into everything in this episode. So for a future episode, or even on Edge of Wonder, we'll go deeper into the Bigfoot thing about the stories of each country and stuff like that, because there's so many and it goes back hundreds of years. I had no idea that this went back to like the 1600s. So interesting, really is. But all right, let me know what you guys think. Let me know which one was your favorite in the comments. I would like to know it. And let me know if you have anything too. If you find anything weird or hear about weird news, you can send it to weirdernews@rise.tv. You can also comment below too. We'll see those in the comments, but definitely email us if you find anything odd or strange out there. So I'll include it in the show. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great, wonderful Wednesday, and I'll see you for Friday Night Live on Friday. Take care, everyone.